Welcome to Building Stories, a podcast where we tell honest and sometimes funny stories about construction and digital transformation. We're joined by a very special guest, Bilal Succar, who's a specialist consultant, performance assessor and independent researcher. His focus is on developing digital transformation policies, generating international BIM adoption benchmarks, and sharing open knowledge through an international community of researchers, practitioners and policy makers. And mate, I know that's only a very short version of your very extended bio. So thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah. It's always funny, people ask me to send a bio. I'm not sure what to include and exclude. If you make it too long, it sounds very pretentious. Make it too short, you miss stuff.
I think you got it right, mate. You got it right. Yeah.
Thank
so
you,
in your young years, mate, was there any hints that you would want to be involved in this industry? Did you see yourself here when you were a child or not?
No, not really. I actually started, and where do you start? When I start, let's say start from university, it's okay, early university years, because I've changed so many study programs. It's just crazy. I started studying business administration. Yeah, which wasn't fun at all. Which just influenced. Yeah, really, I didn't like it. I just like when my father is a kind of a small businessman kind of thing, and he wanted all his children to follow his footsteps. So never thought of anything else.
Okay.
So you go in and try to learn the secrets of the trade, let's say, from more professionals, then try to up the game, and then you discover in the way that doesn't suit you at all. And this was, when I was studying marketing, this was my first ever course that I failed. Okay. I've always been the kind of student that sits at the front, kind of guy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the nerd. So when you fail something, tells you something not quite right here, So, and then I actually met someone by mistake. They were just showing their portfolio of stuff they're doing, like art, and something switched on. And I changed my study pathway and started studying interior design, fine arts.
Yep.
Okay. Fast forward, but back into the BIM thing, and that's takes there's a kind of a journey when I moved to Australia back in 2001. Couldn't work in interior design, which I really loved. Yeah, it's very different here.
Yeah.
So by necessity, I shifted to CAD and then IT, and this BIM thing started happening, and I just fell in love with it. So that's really it.
So what are the key moments kind of following that time? So you're in CAD, you're in the early stages of digital transformation. What changes did you see along that journey?
To be honest, not much has changed,
Yeah?
Yeah, look, it changes. The terminology changes a lot. Okay. So you start with, used to be CAD and then became like intelligent 3D or 3D. And then this BIM term comes along and actually it's quite surprising how long it survived as a term. It's still going on strong. And then now you have these new terms, digital twin, etc. But it's all the same story. It's all about efficiency through digital means, how you use digital technologies and processes to improve your performance. Doesn't matter what you call it, actually.
No, it's true.
Yeah, it's still the same. Actually, if you look at some of the digital twin materials out there, the policies, the strategies, you can just replace digital twin with BIM and you're back 10 years. If you replace it with CAD, you're back 20.
Yeah, interesting. So what's been the challenges for you, either on a personal or professional level, through these, changes in terminology to kind of keep up with things and to stay ahead of the game?
Right. Look, I didn't have to draw a line in the sand and saying I'm going to stick with the BIM term. Not because it's amazing or anything. It's just because people understand what you're talking about when you say it. Most people, okay? And when now people come and say, no, we're not into BIM, we're into something called digital engineering, or something called virtual design and construction, VDC, or whatever, wherever you are.
Mm.
And then they start to open the kind of the same topics, but just using a twist on them. This is where I say, no. Okay, all this, we can let's just, for the sake of argument, call all of this BIM, okay? Because they're very, very, very similar. So that's been a challenge. Like, you don't want people to start generating the same materials over and over again just by changing term. Yeah.
Yeah. And when you say materials, you're talking about like training and kind of those implementation things, just a repetitive work that's involved. Yeah.
Like this, if you say there's foundations and there's kind of layers which are specific to certain things you want to get out of the technology, the foundations are very, very similar. Like, you still need good software, you still need good hardware, you still need good training, you need a change management program, you need the knowledge management program. These are the same, But there's also on top, there's a layer which is specific to buildings, specific to infrastructure, which the terminology changes there. Like if you're doing a city-wide kind of transformation journey, the terminology and software, terminology you use is a bit different if you're just focusing on housing. If you're working internationally, it's different if you're working locally. But let's say the majority of the topics are the same. The foundations are the same. So this is really why I try to focus and keep the attention of people I'm working with on the common stuff.
Yeah, good. And so,
yeah.
Sorry, go, Ricky.
I was going to change the subject ever so slightly, just to kind of, I guess what I'm interested in is more the future. You've spoken about how you've already seen the transformation in the industry from CAD to BIM and so forth. Everything that you're seeing now, Bilal, like, what do you see the future of digital construction? Where do you see the construction heading into the next 10, 15 years? And what role will BIM play in that future? Are you experimenting with that thought, and how are you explaining that to the others?
Of course, we have to always keep track with what's changing. But construction is a cosmos in its own. Like I say, when say people, what's happening in construction? You say, well, what do you mean? Like construction is the biggest industry ever, I know some people say there's another industry that came before construction, like back in the, I say construction is one of the first things that people learn how to do. And now we can't address the whole industry in one go. So if you're a designer, you see something completely different to what a facility manager sees, I've learned that the hard way, like when developing protocols and strategies, that these are quite different worlds. Looking into the future, like, there's a kind of evolutionary growth, and there's some revolutionary things that happen, time and time again. The evolution is the same, as I mentioned before. This is the focus of what we do is kind of this gradual evolution of what does it mean to be competent, in the digital space. What does it mean to be competent with the advent of AI, machine learning, etc. With the advent of robotics, how people should learn slowly how to integrate these into their research and their training, in their work. Okay. These are all evolutionary. There's very few things that you could call revolutionary in our industry. Okay, it's not like we didn't have electricity. Now we have electricity, and this kind of it's a revolution. Many people try to create these kind of fictitious revolutions, like they say Industry 3.0, Industry 4.0, Industry 5.0, whatever you want to call them. These actually are kind of layers upon layers. But we can see that at what certain point, these add up enough to say there's a clear line before and after, okay? And BIM has been, although it's an evolution of CAD, but there's enough things changed to say maybe it created some kind of mini revolution. And the next one would be, of course, because of AI or machine learning, to be exact.
And what do you think that's going to do? Like, if we get really pointy, do you think about jobs being lost? Do you think about new roles? Do you think there's still a BIM manager in 2 years' time? What do you think?
Nobody knows, but let's say that what I can see from the work we do is that there is a disintegration of roles into smaller kind of mini roles. So rather than saying someone say I'm an architect, okay, or an engineer. Now you could say, even now, then you don't have to wait. You say, what do you mean? Okay, of course I know what an architect, is. What do you work on? Okay,
Yes. So you got to got to become more niche, more specific. Yeah.
more specific, like what are your competency profile, really? And this is going into the future, becoming more and more, becoming clearer. Like it's not enough now to have this kind of foundational layer that you've called a label. Now you say you must be able to say, I can do this, I can do that. Although I am permitted to do this because I'm an architect or I'm a dentist or whatever, but on top of that, I can do these I can deliver these, I have these abilities, I can use this software. You tell me, I ask you if you want, like, what's the difference between an architect 5 years ago, an architect 5 years from now, if you would just add AI into the mix,
Yeah.
Both of them are architects, but the ones who know how to use AI to the benefit, they know how to do rapid iteration. You can inspect, you can do space planning. The ability of the quantity and the quality of things they can do, as if they're very different. Like this is an architect. They're like 5 people here and just 1 person there,
Yeah. And that makes sense for architecture, which is kind of an ancient discipline, if you like. BIM is a recent discipline that we kind of invented 10, 15 years ago. And I just wonder, is it going to go away? Because I've started to see BIM people get integrated back into IT teams, or they've become mentor trainers and not so much project operators. Do you see any trends there?
Look, it differs based on where you are. Like we typically, if you're in Australia or the UK and the US or wherever, you see the world as if it's just limited by these kind of locations. There's kind of a wave for digital transformation. If you take them as an example, digital twin and AI, etc., we are at a completely different kind of stage than other countries. If we just take them, it's no longer really. It doesn't add much if you say I know BIM nowadays.
No, it doesn't.
No. But in certain countries, at the start of the wave, it's quite a differentiator between one person or between one company and another. So depends where you're looking. The term itself dissolves, but the components stay. Okay. Now people still will add a label because they want to develop a program around something. So rather now than saying BIM, you will use digital engineering because you add stuff to it, or you add VDC, or you say digital twin, whatever it is. You still have labels just to focus people's attention. But the actual content of these labels, they diffuse. They become part of what you do normally on a daily basis. Okay. But this is a maturity. It's a sign of maturity of the market. But in markets that haven't really matured yet, these labels are really clear cut. You can see them, and there's with them, without them, with a topping, without a topping, kind of thing.
Yeah, it's very true. What would you like? You connect with academia and training and students, I guess. How do you guide them now, knowing what you know and what you've seen? Do you push them straight to pick a niche, or do you say establish a baseline set of competencies? Like, how do you guide people from the start of their career?
I don't work directly with students because I'm not in academia as such. Like I have an affiliation with a university in Canada, but you've never been a full academic. But let's say I always give 2 different messages depending on who I'm speaking to. Depending, like if the person in front of you is highly specialized, I will tell them the opposite. If they're really going to fluffy directions, I say you have to be specialized at least one thing. But if I add these 2 things together, because of and you add AI on top, if you add this kind of differentiator now, you have to be knowledgeable of all the soft skills. Okay, so you have to be a good communicator. I would add you have to be a good artist to a degree. You have to have some visual kind of intelligence. You need to be emotionally intelligent, of course. You know how to make others think the way you think, or at least understand how others think. But this is not enough anymore. You need to have a specialty. Okay, that specialty need to be as narrow as possible, because if you don't have that narrow specialty, you cannot really excel in it anymore, because there's so many things we need to learn. And if you want to be special in anything, you have to be you have to narrow your field. So you can now say I'm a BIM expert. What does that really mean anymore?
That's
It
right.
doesn't mean anything. Like it used to mean something. Now you have to say, okay, I'm an ISO 19650 kind of compliance specialist. I can do, I don't know, virtual programming. Okay, I'm a specialist in that. I can give you something that you can do yourself. You can no longer say I'm a just generic terms.
How in your research, how close have you kind of got to connecting the idea of BIM to like the real stuff happening on construction sites? Have you explored the connection or the breakdown of the connection of the digital world to kind of the real world?
Right. Yes. And for this to work, like so to make this connection, you cannot use this BIM as a just big umbrella term. Okay. And out of experience, and this is I discovered by mistake during a workshop, which is that best language to use when talking to people to bridge that physical virtual gap, if you want, or understanding, is to use what we refer to as use cases or model uses or information uses. Okay. So rather than saying, let's do BIM or let's do VDC or let's do digital twin, say, what are we trying to do in the physical space and what is its translation in the digital space? So for example, are you trying to do cost estimation, like do better cost estimation in the physical world? How is that more efficiently done in the digital world? Are you trying to do I don't know, seismic studies to see how the effects of earthquakes on your structures? How would you do this better in a digital world, which could be through 3D models or could be through, integrated data systems? Doesn't have to have models. So really, by focusing on a use case by use case approach, we can bridge that physical to virtual gap much easier. People understand it much better.
And how do you think it works? Like, because projects can go from very, very big to very small. And it seems like traditionally BIM has kind of gravitated towards the large projects where there's a lot of money. How do you see that kind of filtering back through to just the general, construction industry right to the domestic level?
Look, I think BIM is the most useful, not in just large, complex projects which have what we refer to as multiple functional layers. And we have projects that have multiple functions, like you have not just air conditioning and structure. You could have low voltage, electricity and high voltage, and then you have chiller systems and whatever. And you try to integrate all these functions within your projects. And this is typically within complex projects like airports and hospitals, etc. But BIM also has a second side to it, is doesn't matter what the project size is if you repeat it a lot. Okay. So if you're doing lots and lots of the same thing, and I've seen this even back in 2002, if you're doing lots of petrol stations or doing lots of schools, or if you're doing lots of houses, okay, BIM shines there because it enables you to do these efficiencies of scale. So it's everywhere. It's just where it gets you more benefits when you have a lot of repetition or you have lots of complexity. The things in the middle this is where the muddy, it muddies the picture, okay? Because it's not complex enough and it's not repetition enough. And it's arguable that sometimes introducing these complex things into your workflow just makes things harder.
Yes. Yeah, that was going to be my next question is, in some cases, probably the ones you just described, BIM is seen as a pure cost, something that we're not using, it's not useful, we've been forced to do it. Like, how do you think we fix some of those issues moving forward?
These things cannot be forced. And this is part of the research we've done, and what we refer to as macro adoption studies, like how is BIM adopted at macro scale. So you look at the whole country, or you look at the whole region, like look at Victoria, or you look at New Zealand, okay? what are the things that causes BIM to be adopted fast, okay? And you will notice, and this is academic, that there is either BIM is adopted because of what we refer to as top-down, or coercion. Like there is a kind of mandate, like what you say in Singapore, for example, like a really great case of top-down, whole of China as well. Like these kind of cultures, or you have something called bottom-up. People don't understand what bottom-up really is, but it's just when people normally do things, like you don't normally do things in your architecture company or engineering company, and all engineers start using it because it's more efficient, not for any other reason, becomes the norm, between them, and then it filters up. It becomes on larger projects and becomes kind of the standard level of care. You can't not choose it. The third dynamic, which we refer to as middle out, which is these larger organizations, like large supply chains, electricity companies, like big, the army, the defense forces, they can force their supply chains to use, whatever they want them to use based on their standards. And over time, they also influence the government, becomes top-down as well. So if you bring all these three different things together, only when, people find value or people are coerced, they will move forward, okay? In a country like Australia, where there's no coercion, there's no way to move people unless they find value.
Okay.
And if they don't find value, when they see the others are finding value and they're just falling behind them, then they imitate them. So you can't really convince people with anything unless you force them or they find benefit.
Great. Yeah, I get this. So finding value then, like, is it something that's just happening by accident, or because your mate is doing it? Or do you think industry is getting informed about the value and it's actually working from a education point of view?
Now, look, we have to now focus on each market. It's very different. Like here in Australia, we are we don't have any nothing can force you to do anything. Not we're more like the US than we are like the UK, let's say. But there is a role for the government, federal or state, to do some stuff they're not doing, which is to clarify the path forward, and provide incentives, or at least some, general information about the trajectory. You see it now, they're doing this with AI and better than they're doing it with other things, but you need someone to guide you, even if there's no enforcement. So we don't have that either in New Zealand or in Australia or the US, kind of these markets. But because we have high labor costs, okay, and this is a very big but, okay? Because we have high labor costs here, people will try to use technology to lower their costs, okay? So they will adopt these technologies faster than places where there's low labor costs, okay? And the third thing that I would mention is imitation, which you mentioned. That's the strongest force out there in the market, okay? If you, as an engineer or landscape artist, whatever, you see others benefiting from any kind of technology to win work, you will imitate them. No problem. That's the strongest kind of force there.
Yeah. The other, I guess, part of it is the way that some of the mandating or the forcing seems to be happening is the project handover requirements. Like, they're not necessarily dictating how the supply chain does something, but they're saying at the end, Transport for New South Wales or something, we want to have these data points. I don't know what your experience is, but because they haven't provided how to do it, just what they want, the market is kind of trying to solve this problem over and over again. Have you seen some of that?
Yeah, look, I don't like prescriptive mandates. Like I don't like it when, as a kind of research in this area, you look at, it's called prescriptive and performance-based kind of codes, okay? Yeah. Or strategies are the same. It could be very prescriptive, say, I want you to do BIM this way, or it's the highway. Either you do it this way or not. You get lots of, efficiencies from being to comply, but you you strangle innovation. People don't have a chance to find better ways of doing it. The opposite side of the coin, of course, or the other side of the coin, is you don't make it compulsory to do it in a certain way, and people just, as you mentioned, they would just repeat things over and over. if you had, there's not one of them would be better than the other. A combination would be like where the prescription is for something very clear, but not specifying the actual steps, because you don't want to, you just allow people to think about better ways of doing it.
And I agree with you as well, but the only danger that I see is a lot of abortive work in industry when someone solves a problem on a project and then they go to the next project and they solve it again in a completely different way.
Right.
Meanwhile, you're doing it different on your project. This seems to be spinning wheels a little bit. I don't know the answer, but what do you think?
The root cause for this is not the mandates themselves, it's the nature of our industry, and it's what we refer to it as disintegrated supply chain, okay? Every project will have, majority of its players meeting for the first time, okay? Very few projects are only on specialized kind of things, like if you're doing nuclear reactors, because it's all the rage now in the news, you will have a supply chain that can learn over time. So that you do the first one, and then when you do the second time, it's the majority of the players are the same. So you can improve the process. You can adopt better technologies. You can see that in cars, like because the supply chains are very limited. There's hundreds of them, but they're still very, very, very limited. So there's the learning process, is manifest. You can see it. We don't have that in our industry, in our country, okay? But in other countries where they have integrated supply chains, you see these lessons learned. Like when you have and it has been tried in the US, has been tried in many countries, but hasn't really succeeded, at least at scale. But in countries where it succeeded, you can see these lessons learned are being adopted in the next project, because the same people,
Okay, can you describe how they've done it? Or is it literally just by stabilizing the team that you do it?
Yeah, there must be an incentive to build an integrated supply chain. Like you must have long lead lines. You can have multiple projects coming through, which allows you to form, a kind of a temporary organization with multiple organizations in it. And you can use IPD or use any kind of collaborative contracts that allows you to benefit from these repetitive businesses. But if every time you are building a team for a project, and you don't know where the next project is coming from, or whether your client will give it to you or give it to someone else, there's no incentive for that. Okay, and I don't see a solution for this unless there's like a change in technology to a degree where it forces us to integrate our supply chains.
Yeah, and do you think there's a lack of kind of transparency or sharing of information that also leads to this? Like perhaps people protecting what they perceive to be their unique approach or their IP that stifles innovation? Or
I guess so, but there is, I don't think there's anything hidden nowadays. Like some people just are overly protective of common knowledge. Like, okay, what you're doing, everybody's doing it that way. Like, Yeah, look, sharing of knowledge is very important. Now, a sharing of knowledge is not about specific steps somebody follows, but it's sharing of objectives. Like, for example, if we all use the same kind of set of objectives, you want to improve this, improve that, improve, as I mentioned, these use cases kind of thing. And we can provide information about how to improve clash detection, improve cost estimation, improve whatever. Everybody can learn from these kind of common streams of knowledge without dictating to them how they themselves would have to follow specific steps. So there is a way of improving efficiency and productivity and performance without really making us all work exactly the same way.
What do you think the link, you've mentioned AI a few times, what do you think the link between kind of BIM and general construction data that's available and AI is? Like, it's nice to mention all these technologies, but how can you kind of integrate those things together?
Right, but we have to use terminology from the AI field, not from BIM field, to understand this, and I'm not an expert there, but let's say that we're currently doing language models, okay, large language models. The new set of models are spatial models, okay, which is really more interesting for us in the construction industry. This is where the artificial intelligence kind of agent understands the space, okay? So you imagine you tell you how to improve the space, how to build the space, how to optimize the space, and when we say space doesn't mean just a room, it could be like a whole facility. So the next generation of AI models are spatial. Okay, language models have hit the ceiling. Okay, The second part of it is what's called agentic models, like agents. Currently, we deal with AI through a prompt, What's happening now, let's start in 2024 and 2025, is agents. Like you have an agent and say, go find me a solution for this, okay? They will ask you a couple of questions and go and run multiple kind of investigations and collations and suggest solutions for you. And this is like you're having someone that you trust working with you on a problem, okay? This problem, if you have this agent and they are spatially able, okay, they can improve your engineering. You can improve your landscaping, improve your design, okay, in general, improve your operation. So really, for us in this industry, the next phase of AI will hit us really hard if we're not really, we don't embrace it. First phase was more about language or focus, like policies and, contracts and whatever. But the next phase is ours.
Yeah, I agree. And so you're seeing a lot of people playing with the technology and they're exporting some data and putting it into LLMs and playing. Have you seen anything that's productivized, that assists a project manager, for example, or do you think this is coming soon?
Project management is usually a very structured kind of discipline. Let's take it just one step before. I'm not a project manager. I never wish to be, but it's not my field. But let's say, and this is actually one of the things I in the past, I did a comparison between the role of BIM manager and a project manager. They're completely opposite. And from a mentality perspective, one wants to share and wants to, make uniform and you want to collaborate, whatever, and the other wants to put everybody in their place and just a maestro kind of thing,
So is that a psychology analysis you did of those two different personas?
It's more functions. Just imagine a project manager that says, no problem, you share your documents with each other, The project manager will never do that. They will put gateways, you share this way, in this format, I will approve you before you move to the next step. It's very different kind of approach versus a good BIM coordinator or manager trying to put everyone on the same table, sharing information, using the same language, allowing for mistakes, etc. It's not very different, okay? So these are quite different things. But look, if you think of engineer, and they have their expertise in engineering, any kind of engineering you can think of. And you need to have expertise to benefit from AI. If you don't have expertise, you're just playing around. It just sets a bubble. Okay, you can just blow air into a bubble, or a balloon, and everyone could look at it as big. You just scratch it a bit, and it blows in your face. Okay, so you need expertise to use. You use intelligence to use artificial intelligence. Okay, so if you're a good engineer, you will be able to use AI tools to improve your engineering abilities, your competence. Okay, you're a good architect, the same. Okay, but if you're a bad architect or bad engineer, it won't help you.
No, you're right. Yeah, you're right. So put your real futuristic hat on. Can you see something you mentioned before, like revolution? Do you think there is a big disruption coming? There is a big revolution coming, or do you think it's just going to be this iterative
we are in the middle of it.
change?
We are in the middle of it. Looking back, let's say, put yourself 10 years ahead from now, now you're in 2035. I think you look back at 2023, 2024, 2025, these years as a kind of a watershed moment in all these different things. I may be wrong, but that's what I see. I see we are in the middle of it. That's why we can't see it.
It makes sense. I'm interested in the regional aspect as well. Like you mentioned, some countries are just starting to adopt BIM. Like, is there any efforts you think that kind of can globally share things and elevate at a planet Earth level, or do you think it's just going to happen as it happens in each region?
Look, we're living in an island, it's a big island as well. Ricky is living in an island, okay, but not all the world is made of islands, okay? So there's certain regions where they collaborate more on these topics. Like I'll give an example, like Latin America, where I went multiple times, and did work there, did assessments there. There's lots of sharing of information between countries there. They have a council. They do research together. They share knowledge, protocols, requirements, etc. So there's some lessons shared across there. Different countries have approached this in their own unique way. If I'm honest, I think Australia can't use it as a case study, because we're a federation, and you can use probably a Ministry of Transport in New South Wales as a case study, but you can't use Australia because you can use Northern Queensland as they have their own thing with health. You cannot use Australia, but in certain other countries, we see completely different behaviors, different kind of integration of effort. We see academia. Like in Brazil, for example, academia is very well organized on the topic of BIM. They have their own association. They have their own publication. I don't know how many hundreds of universities they've got. They coordinate across the universities. So it's very different what you see depending where you look and what lenses you put on. And usually we are limited in reading English material. Like most of us, we only think things are happening when they happen in English.
Right.
But there's so much things happening in Chinese. There's so many things happening in Spanish, and across, which we don't see. But doesn't mean they don't exist. They're happening.
Yeah, totally. Can you tell us a little bit about change agents and some of the ways that you helped project teams over the years?
Sure. Change agents doesn't mean the consultants that work. It's intended to refer to the people inside companies, which are change agents. Okay, these are the people who discover a good way of doing things or a better way of doing things, and they need to be supported so this thing diffuses. So that's what's the general idea behind it. Started with the BIM thing, when Revit and ArchiCAD start becoming kind of software. My work started as a trainer. I used to train in Revit, and then over time, client base changes a bit, becomes implementation strategies, and starting in 2013, the focus shifted, like more than 10 years ago now, on assessment. Okay, so so this is really what you refer to as second tier. Like you started your implementation process and it didn't work, and many companies do that. And questions come. If you're wise, you say, what went wrong? Okay, this is where assessment comes into play. So our work mostly is with companies and now policymakers, because now we work with governments and research centers, etc., where we try to discover what went wrong and how it can be improved. Okay, and now 2025 now, most of the work we do and change agents. We do two things. One, policies, and assessments, benchmarking, kind of large scale benchmarking.
Yeah. And those assessments and benchmarking, like how do you go about it? Do you have a standardized approach, or is it quite customized?
Over the years, tried different things, of course. Like it's tried with the basics kind of survey kind of thing, and then you do workshops, etc. But over time, we developed our own tools. So now we have our own kind of platform for assessment with our own methodology. Give an example of work we're doing, which is in public space. Like we're working with a group in Quebec in Canada. They have funding from the government over 5 years now, nearly 5 years, and they wanted to assess a certain percentage of all organizations. So we worked with them, identified the right methodology, we identified what we refer to as statements, what are the things you're trying to discover, what are the purposes, and then we translate this into a kind of benchmarking study. And we collected more than 1 million points. We give it to the government. Then they develop strategies for performance improvement. So our job is to identify what's working, what's not working, give that to the policymaker or to the people that the policymaker have selected to make the change, and then they can develop training plans, they can develop incentives for the market, and many of these kind of projects we've done in different countries.
Yeah, that sounds like very valuable at a high level. At a business level, do those things happen at a microscopic scale? As in, like, are people assessing their policies, trying to improve, or do you think a lot of people just kind of let things go as they are?
So I mentioned one type of assessment we do, like this called the macro, but it could work with just one company. Usually it's, medium to large. So small companies don't really invest much in assessment, sadly. They don't have the incentives to do it. But if it's a medium to large, they would, like we would work with them to identify their profiles, like what the target profiles. So you're a construction company or engineering company, and you have a vision where you want to be in 5 years, okay? We use the methodology, this research-based methodology, to describe what that means, because people say, I want to be the best in the industry. And say, okay, fine. Okay, what does that really mean? And they say, okay, you want to be able to do this at this level. You want to do this at this cost. You want to be able to do this. So we describe that. Okay, that's called the, profile. And then we develop assessments to assess their current state against these kind of targets and provide them with information. Say, you are here and you want to go there. Okay. And they say, okay, general strategy, this is how you can achieve filling that gap. And this is for a single company. It doesn't have to be like for their own custom performance profiles.
Yeah, it makes sense. So these assessments, are there any common themes you're observing, like particularly across construction in Australia, things that are working or not working?
Most of the things we find are common. Okay, it's very rare to find something very specific unless there is a policy environment which forces you to use specific contracts, for example. Okay, if you're in a place where you can only use traditional contracts, okay, not in Australia, okay, then it skews kind of the things you see, or there is very tight separation between disciplines, like in Quebec, for example, where they have a very strong kind of laws that separate, architects from engineers. In the same office, you would find that architects cannot sit with engineers. They have to sit on specific sides. At least that's when we did the assessment. So most things are common if they have the same legal framework, that are the same kind of contracts. Okay. So if you're working in the Australia or US or UK, Canada, kind of these kind of, it's very similar. Okay. If you're working in Chile, you will find something similar to a degree with Argentina or whatever. Okay, so it really depends, but it's not global; it is regional.
So, can you give an example? Like, is it around not getting enough information to price a job properly, so the contract was out of whack from the beginning, or is it things like this?
Depends on how these who your clients are. Like in some countries, the central government or the government manages. They have a kind of a clearinghouse for all large contracts, and it could be the biggest client in the market as well. They could control 20-30%. So when that's the case, like in certain countries in Latin America and in Eastern Asia, they can really enforce very tight kind of controls on what needs to be delivered and how it is delivered. And the information flow is clearer. Okay, I'm not saying it's enough; it's clearer, and people learn how to work around it. But in here in Australia, it's picture is different depending on the discipline you're in. Like if you're in housing, it's very different picture to if you're in schools, or very different if you're working in hospitals. Like it's very well organized in hospital, in health, while it's not that organized in residential, let's say. So it depends. It's not really market by market. It's more discipline by discipline, or
Yeah, project types. Yeah, it makes sense. So as we start to wrap up, mate, anything you're excited about over the next year or so, 2025, other than you said a good acai bowl you enjoy?
Yes, always looking for acai. Excited. I'm excited about what's happening in our industry. I'm really excited about the empowerment of the individual through these technologies. I can see the organizational structures will be different as we go forward. Nobody knows how they will be, but I'm excited that good specialists can now perform at much higher level with the same effort than before. Okay, and it's very exciting if they know what to do. But also, there's of course some worry about that the governments and the people who force certain processes do not keep up. and and this is typically the case. They are well behind, how the things are changing, the technologies are changing. So yeah, it is exciting time to be in our industry. It's exciting time to be in any industry, to be honest.
Yeah. And what's a good way for people to find you and reach out to you?
LinkedIn is the best way. Yeah. And if you're in Melbourne, you can invite me for an acai bowl. That's
sounds good.
Love it.
Yeah. All right, thank you so much. Thanks, Ricky, for co-hosting, and thank you so much, Bilal, for all that insight. It's certainly been great. We've covered a lot of ground, so thank you so much for coming on and sharing all that information.
Thank you for the invitation. Thank you, Ricky and Luke, and all the best with the podcast.
Likewise, mate.